Welcome to Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show, brought to you by True North.
Hello and welcome to you all. Happy Monday. This is Canada's most irreverent talk show, the Andrew Lawton Show on True North. On this Monday, June 10th, 2024, we are, I guess, almost, well, no, we are beyond, I'm getting my days mixed up. In like just a couple of weeks, we'll be halfway through the year. So if 2024 is not your bag, we're like just about at the top of the crest there, and it'll all be downhill from there. So take from that what you will. But it is good to have you on the show. We'll be talking about the Liberal government finally making up on its promise of increasing the capital gains tax hike. I know this is a promise a lot of people in the country were hoping they would not follow through on. But as we spoke about last week with Conservative MP Adam Chambers, it seems to be that the government was very keen on getting a windfall from everyone just like horrified and terrified and selling off their assets and having to pay the lower tax rate on that. But we'll talk about that in a little bit because Canadian doctors are quite frustrated that the Liberals are forging ahead and not giving them a carve out on this. Also, we'll check in with our friend Kris Sims later on in the program here. And I think in doing so, that will be rather fascinating because she has a lot of opinions on this attempt at gagging the oil and gas sector, which the federal government is doing. They're doing the old 50 Shades of Grey to the oil and gas industry. So if you don't get that reference, don't Google it, please. But let me begin. This story is coming from a video clip that I actually tweeted out. Everyone's honing in on like two syllables in particular from Justin Trudeau. But to give some context here, he was speaking to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And there was a moment where someone, I believe it was a municipal mayor of some kind, asked him a question about government spending. He asked this question to Justin Trudeau about how much the feds are spending, about the debt, the deficit, and how, if at all, Justin Trudeau could ever hope to balance the budget. Now, the whole clip is over 3 minutes, I think. And whenever we play that much Justin Trudeau, I get a bunch of angry emails from people that don't want to look that much. So we'll skip out on the question. We'll skip out on most of the answer. I want to go specifically to a little section at the end when he makes a claim that is in and of itself something we've heard from him before. But I want you to pay attention not to what he said, but to the reaction to it, understanding that this is a room full of Canadian mayors. This is a room full of elected officials, people that want to suck up to the federal government normally to get federal funding to get Justin Trudeau to visit. These are mayors of cities and towns that are not having any of what Justin Trudeau is selling. Take a look.
Our economy macroeconomically is doing better than just about anyone else out there, and companies around the world are seeing that because since 2015, we've seen a 60% increase in direct investment in Canada across the country, from Volkswagen to others. But we've also, just last year, we were the third largest country in the world in absolute terms after the US and Brazil for foreign direct investment. We made the conscious and deliberate decision to say, if the Canadian economy is as strong as it is right now, which it is, we need to put that in service of helping Canadians with the cost of living right now without increasing inflation. And that's why the Bank of Canada was able to just drop the rate on Wednesday, because inflation is coming down and now interest rates are going to come down as well. So that was a choice we made. And in parenthesis, every single one of those programs, dental, pharma, childcare, are things that the Conservative Party chose to vote against because they're worried that inflation was too high. Well, we're dropping inflation and we're being there for Canadians, not with cuts and austerity, and we're going to keep doing that. And on the carbon price, it actually puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families. That's a parliamentary budget officer who says that. It's absolutely true.
Oh, interesting. So he says, oh yeah, the carbon tax, everyone makes more money. Well, not everyone. 8 out of 10 Canadians make more money than the carbon tax cost them. And then everyone in that room just starts booing the guy. They clearly aren't buying it. And did you see as he said that, I don't know if it's possible to put a screen grab up of it, but you can watch the clip later. He sinks back into his seat and just smirks, this big giant smirk. And then as people are booing him, he says it's totally true. And then he just laughs. Those two syllables, ha ha, as if to tell you, you know what? I don't even care what you think because this is what I'm doing. And if it costs Canadians extra, tough luck. It was just this evil, maniacal cackle of sorts that Justin Trudeau was giving, again, to fellow heads of government, to mayors across this country of towns, cities, regional municipalities. This is what he's doing. He just doesn't care anymore. He just doesn't care. So originally it was all the premiers that were alienated by this. Conservative premiers, even the Liberal premier in Newfoundland, to some extent the New Democrat premier in Manitoba. But now municipal mayors are saying to Justin Trudeau, boo this man. They just don't want what he is selling. And I find that interesting because I've often remarked on Justin Trudeau losing his shine. And I don't mean like wiping off the blackface. I mean losing the aura that he once had about him, where people would just look at him as though he could do no wrong. Right now, they are looking at him in the opposite way, as though he can do no right, because increasingly that is the tendency of this government. And he's alienated his partners at the provincial and municipal level, so much so that they are booing him at a conference when he tries to once again issue a defense of his carbon tax. Now, what I find noteworthy here beyond that is that this isn't going anywhere. I think it's 2 weeks from today, there's going to be a by-election in St. Paul's. Now, St. Paul's, I forget who I was talking about this. I can't remember if it was I was interviewed on their show or they were on my show. But within the last week, in some interview, I had a conversation with someone about the St. Paul's by-election. And I don't normally cover the St. Paul's by-election because St. Paul's is about as liberal as it gets. If you were to just have a situation in which you say, we don't even really need to have an election there, let's just put the Liberal in and call it a day, you could probably make a case that St. Paul's was the place to do that. Not that I would support that. I believe in democracy. But St. Paul's has been this ironclad Liberal stronghold for years. But right now, it's not. Right now, there is a chance that the Conservatives could actually win St. Paul's. Now, there are a lot of people who believe they won't, and a lot of people who think that, even if the Conservatives are doing relatively well, Toronto St. Paul's will still stay in Liberal hands. It's Leslie Church is the Liberal candidate, and I believe Don Stewart's the Conservative. But it'll be close. And even if the Conservatives are within 5% of the Liberals and the Liberals win, that is a strong and stunning rebuke of Justin Trudeau. That if you're a Liberal in this country should make you look at him and be like, you clearly have taken us as far as you can. The only way you can take us now is further into the ground, which as a party that believes maybe we want to do something in the future, like be elected again down the road, we are not too keen on. But when Trudeau is just sitting back on stage and cackling at his critics, this is not a guy that's going to effectively communicate his message to Canadians, because clearly he holds Canadians who disagree with him, even people, again, who are mayors, in such contempt. He holds them in such contempt. And it's the way that we now see this tone shift from Chrystia Freeland as well, which is quite an interesting one. Now, Chrystia Freeland, she's the Deputy Prime Minister, also the Finance Minister. She is the point person on selling this carbon tax. Sorry, there's a Freudian slip. She sells that too, but the point person on selling the capital gains tax hike. The government is raising the capital gains tax by about 50%. They announced this in the budget. Then they pulled it out of the budget and said they were going to put it out separately. They still have not come up with a plan to do this. So just today, they're introducing a Ways and Means motion, which is basically a stopgap measure pending a formal legislative cementing of this in the fall. So it's a bit procedural. It's going ahead. As of, I think, June 24th, CRA is going to continue to or start taxing based on the increase, which is why companies and high net worth, high investment individuals are just dumping a whole bunch of assets now so they can save, in some cases, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars by paying the lower rate. Now, all of this notwithstanding, hear the way that Chrystia Freeland defends this policy. Hear the way in this clip from a press conference she gave in which she sells this to Canadians.
But I would also like to ask Canada's 1%. In fact, Canada's 0.13% to consider this. What kind of a Canada do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where kids go to school hungry? Do you want to live in a country where a teenage girl gets pregnant just because she doesn't have the money to buy birth control? Do you want to live in a country where the only young Canadians who can buy their own homes are those with parents who can help with the down payment? Do you want to live in a country where we make the investments we need in healthcare, in housing, in old age pensions, but we lack the political will to pay for them and choose instead to pass a ballooning debt onto our children? Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities behind ever higher fences, using private health care and airplanes, because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot? Every Canadian across our great country needs to ask themselves these same questions, because the stakes could not be higher.
You're on the board of the World Economic Forum. You literally party every year with the global elites, and you're like, oh, these people with their private jets, and oh, these people that get private health care. And she owns multiple properties in the United Kingdom. She has a rental unit in Ukraine. I think it's her husband has a place in New York. And she's like, oh, well, at least I'm not in a gated community. I may own 5 homes in 3 countries, but at least I don't. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am a global elite. Okay, so that's Chrystia Freeland. Sean just pointed out as well that she also, we should remind you to go with the cheap shot here, where they weren't $700 sneakers. I think they were like $740 sneakers, plus tax. So yeah, she wears $700 shoes, and she's like railing against the elites there and pointing out how the society has turned against them. The wrath of ordinary people, the wrath of the less privileged is burning so hot right now. At first, when I read the transcript, I thought she was making a global warming point. No, she was talking about the anger of the plebs, the anger of the ordinary folks like you and I. And what I find to be so interesting here is that we are seeing time and time again from Chrystia Freeland this idea of just her being everything she's railing against, her being the global elite, her being the one that is going to apparently solve the problems caused by the global elites as well. So I don't quite get how this is going to work out for us. I think as a Canadian, I'm just generally of the mind that whatever's going to happen, we're going to get just absolutely screwed over by it. And that's why the capital gains increase is an interesting one, because they're trying to frame this as only going after the wealthy. It only targets the super rich. It only targets the elites. It only goes after people that have the old private jets and whatever. Justin Trudeau, interestingly enough, you may have heard, he did an interview, I think it was with the New York Times last week, and he used Pierre Poilievre's line. He used Pierre Poilievre's line in which he talked about the have-nots versus the have-yots. So Trudeau is now realizing, this Poilievre guy, he's in the polls when he starts talking about the elites. He's in the polls when he starts talking about these issues. Maybe, just maybe, I should just start cribbing his language. So Chrystia Freeland is doing something very similar there, where she's like, these people, these global elites are the cause of your problem. She's actually becoming a populist now. She's becoming a populist. Maybe she'll be resigning her membership from the World Economic Forum before long because, well, I can't abide by these people with their private jets. Well, the wrath of the working man is burning so bright. But there's a serious, all of it's serious, but there's an especially serious point to be had about the capital gains increase, because this is an example where the government is trying to look at one little thing and saying, we can make your problems go away by taking aim at this group. They're saying the super wealthy. The super wealthy, that's what they're talking about there. The way she describes it is if we just get that tiny little teeny itsy bitsy group with their private jets and their gated communities and their private healthcare, if we get them to pay more, then there will be, let's go through the list she provides. There will be fewer hungry kids. there will be fewer teenage girls getting pregnant, and there will be fewer young Canadians unable to buy homes. So if you see a teenage girl on the street and she has gotten pregnant, that actually could have been solved if Galen Weston had to pay a higher capital gains tax, believe it or not. That if you got like the Thompson family, yeah, if they paid a little bit more, then little Susie's not pregnant, and little Timmy is going to school with a full belly, and that young couple next door to you that lives in their parents' basement, they're going to buy a home, all if Galen Weston just pays a little bit more. So the capital gains tax increase is not, as the government presents it, going to be a panacea. And more importantly, and I think this is the crucial point here, it isn't just the super wealthy that's being affected. It isn't just the super rich. They want to say that this is just a billionaire tax. But the reality is there are a lot of Canadians that are going to be affected by this capital gains tax increase that do not fall at all into that category of the super rich, that don't fall into the category of the super wealthy, that certainly aren't living in gated communities or flying on private jets or getting private healthcare necessarily. And a lot of these people are ordinary small business owners, because remember, it's people that own and operate small businesses who are not given any carve out or any exemption whatsoever from this. So yeah, the super wealthy are going to be hit by it, but also small business owners. And in particular, we've seen from the medical community in Canada, doctors who look at their professional corporations as being a vehicle to save for retirement are being especially penalized for this. I want to welcome into the show Dr. Kathleen Ross, who is the president of the Canadian Medical Association. Dr. Ross, good to speak with you. Thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So let's just begin with the mechanics of this. Why are physicians affected by this in a way that many other groups in Canada are not?
So it's important for Canadians and policymakers to understand that medical corporations are not like other conventional corporations. And that is how many family physicians and other community-based physicians operate. We don't incorporate to build a big practice so that we can sell it. But we do use our corporations to keep money for retirement and other major life events like maternity care, parental leave, or sick leave. Honestly, with the current nationwide shortage of physicians, particularly those delivering the kind of primary care community access that we need, this is a challenge. You're never going to be able to sell your shares or make money off of a corporation.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I would also add here that, yes, doctors are paid well for the work that they do. And I don't want to say that doctors are dealing with, the economic hardships in a way that other people are. But I think it's easy to overstate how wealthy the average family physician is, or especially, rural physicians. And people often forget how much overhead they have as well to run their practices, both in terms of they're dealing with the effects of inflation as well. And medical products that they have to put in their offices are expensive. So these people do not fit into this category of the super wealthy, but the government's messaging on this tax increase has been that it's basically just billionaires who are affected.
Yeah, and I think that's just one piece of the misinformation that's come out with the announcements over the last several weeks. There are roughly 75,000 doctors practicing in Canada, and half of those operate as professional medical corporations. So the estimated 40,000 people impacted can't just be the doctors that she's talking about. So I think we do have to take a step back and really understand this. As you mentioned, self-employed physicians are responsible for those critical infrastructure pieces. So to provide the community office that patients are seen in. We cover those overhead costs, like rent and staff and salaries and all the medical supplies and office equipment. And at the moment, that amounts to anywhere between 40 and 45% of our gross clinical revenue. And the funding and provision of that critical infrastructure is really not easily replaced.
I'm assuming that when this was announced, you were trying to engage your partners in the federal government on this. And I mean, obviously, from what we've heard, there has not been a carve out for doctors. But did it seem like they were receptive to this concern, at least at any stage in the process?
So we've been presenting the information that the federal government asked about, and they asked some questions after the fact. And we've presented our information, I think, in a fair and balanced way, particularly as this is being marketed as a tax fairness. Is this actually fair to professionally incorporated physicians? And the answer to that is no. because unfortunately this will mean maximum capital gains inclusion rate on the very first dollar that earns capital gains inside of a professional corporation. There's no carve out at all. That $250,000 that applies to individuals, or the $1.25 million that applies to other small businesses or corporations, does not in any way apply to professionally medical professional corporations. So the other piece that's really important, because it was mentioned in today's announcement, is that we do not have the ability to simply increase our fees to make up for tax increases or inflation as it relates to overhead, and other professionals may well be able to pass those costs along. And the thought that we could just simply go and adjust our provincial agreements to make up for this change at a federal level is really misinformed. So we do need to have these conversations. We want to continue to have these conversations and really explain to the finance ministry how it is that the healthcare system operates, and what role professional medical corporations have in delivery of critical healthcare services to Canadians.
And I should also point out, I mean, this isn't doctors exploiting a loophole. Over the years, governments have actively encouraged them to structure their businesses in this way in lieu of fee increases, have they not?
Absolutely, and I think it's really important to reiterate, and I know I've said it before, but physicians train for a long time, more than a decade. We don't start our careers till we're well into our 30s most often. Our rates are actually fixed for what we can earn to pay off our debt, and most graduate with an average debt of $300,000. That's a substantial setback, and our careers are shortened because of how long it takes to get where we're going. So these are critical pieces to consider. We have to save for our retirement. I mean, Canada does have a great deal of social programs to support retirees, but we are highly trained professionals, and saving for our own retirement makes sense where it may not make sense to other pockets of workers in Canada. But I think we do need to consider all of these things as we look at shifting how we pay doctors and how we save for our retirement.
So we know that there isn't going to be a carve out. We know the announcement is forging ahead, and we know that, as you indicated there, doctors cannot just raise their fees to deal with this. So realistically, what is going to come from this? What's going to be the effect now that the genie is out of the bottle, if you will?
So I think there is still space. There are ways that we could recognize professional corporations and allow them to have the $250,000 personal exemption that's afforded to individuals, because our medical corporations are in fact us as individuals. The other piece would be to look at including medical corporations in the $1.25 million lifetime exemption. And again, these are possibilities. And I think although the bill has been proposed, there's still space for us to have this conversation. And we want to make sure that we're sharing the right information so that the government can make appropriate decisions and not risk destabilizing the critical parts of our healthcare system that we need. We need physicians setting up in community practice, carrying that infrastructure and providing services to Canadians. And we're already a little bit beleaguered and worn down and carrying the burden of a healthcare system that in many ways is crumbling around us. We don't need another reason to discourage physicians from setting up the practices and delivering the services that Canadians need.
So do I take from that you remain, at least in some way, optimistic that there is still a way to deal with this?
The door is still open. I think there's still time to have a conversation about the uniqueness of medical professional corporations, and we want to have those discussions.
All right. Well, Dr. Kathleen Ross from the Canadian Medical Association, thank you so much for your time.
Much appreciated. Take care.
All right. Thank you. No, it's interesting. And you maybe wonder, okay, why am I highlighting one particular group? Because it's a group that really challenges that line we just shared, that clip we shared from Chrystia Freeland, talking about this as being the domain of those with private jets and those with gated communities and all of that. Not to say there aren't, some doctors that live in gated communities, but the point here is that this is not just about the billionaires. And this is not also, even if it were, I don't believe for a second that Galen Weston paying more in capital gains tax is going to prevent all of those issues that the federal government just spoke about. And by the way, the federal government has shown no willingness or no ability to balance the budget in general. They have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So all that's going to happen when they get this windfall is spend more money. That's what they're going to do. When they get this big, giant windfall from everyone selling off their assets right now, they're just going to say, oh, great, look, we're not going to pay off the credit card. We're not going to invest in anything. We're just going to spend more money to buy more votes in an election year. This is what they do every time. And they try to then say that the issue is one of revenue and we can just go after the rich, get more money from the super rich, and we'll forget that the government is also going after you and I for money. The carbon tax, which incidentally, it's funny how Justin Trudeau likes to point to the carbon tax and say that this is an example of us getting 88 out of 10 Canadians getting more back than we're spending. And oh, even the parliamentary budget officer has said as much, yada, yada, yada. Well, the parliamentary budget officer also said last week that he's been gagged from sharing the government's analysis on the carbon tax, that the government does not want him to talk about the analysis. So they aren't actually letting him say what he really knows and believes and has found about the carbon tax. And you may wonder, if it is all as rosy as the feds are making it out to be, why would they not want Canadians to have it? Why would Canadians not want to have the analysis? Probably the same reason that they don't want Canadians to have the legal analysis they got in the lead up to using the Emergencies Act. We'll move on from the capital gains tax in just a moment, but I wanted to welcome in Kris Sims, who is the Alberta director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, which has come out today and called on the Conservatives and members of Parliament in general to vote against this increase when it goes before the parliamentarians. Kris, good to talk to you. Thanks so much. This is an issue where, and I've been saying this for the last 20 minutes or so, the government is trying to make this out to be this assault on the wealthy. They're trying to do the populism thing, but there are a lot of people whose investments are not at all putting them into that billionaire category that are going to stand to lose here. And more importantly, it's the tax. Like, even if you don't care about the people who are affected, I take the view that when government is looking for more revenue sources, there's a fundamental problem there.
Yeah, for sure. I listened through to the top of your show and I didn't think it was possible, but I think Minister Freeland's worse at communicating than Prime Minister Trudeau in many cases. That was insufferable. She was going through that list. I realize now most of the time, because I worked in the industry so long, sometimes I just can't stand listening to it. I'll watch stuff on subtitles. I'll mute it and I'll watch it on subtitles in order to get the gist of it to do my work. But for her saying that we shouldn't be passing along debt to our children and the next generation, she's the finance minister. Like, she is, right? Like, we're not in an alternate
and
reality.
has been for, I forget when Morneau left, but for a few years, and then Morneau was there before. But, like, she's been in power for 9 years, and she's looking at, like, this massive inequality, the peasants storming the gated communities, and it's like, look at what's happening in this country. Yeah, sure, I would agree, Minister, but you've been the one there.
You're on the other side of the fence there, darling.
Yeah.
This is
it's
it.
like when Justin Trudeau took a knee in the Black Lives Matter protest. Like, they're protesting you. He's looking around. I hope they don't know that I'm actually out here.
And this is, I try to give people pro tips quite often. A free pro tip to the minister: stop talking like that. Stop saying, don't do that. I don't care which party you're in. Stop doing that, because you're going to irritate people because you're condescending towards them. So don't do that. But more importantly, with the issue of the capital gains tax. So anecdotally and personally, so I was in the hospital with a friend of mine a few months back rather, a young friend of mine who was having cardiac issues. And so we talked to 2 cardiologists, totally unrelated. They didn't know where I worked. Like, taxes are the last thing that usually come up. 2 of them mentioned this capital gains tax thing. So I'm really glad that you were able to speak with the Canadian Medical Association spokesperson there to highlight this, because I think unless you have like a doctor who's a sibling or in the family or something, you may not know how they're structured. So they're not in line for a pension, okay? In the same way, say, a nurse would be in line for a pension, or a police officer. Doctors have to, feather their own nest and finance their own future. And so again, like you pointed out, they're not about to line up at food banks, but we have to be cognizant of how they financially structure themselves. And according to this one doctor I was talking to, apparently the government had basically said a generation ago, Andrew, okay, guys, this is how you can do it. Use capital gains, structure yourself as a corporation, and this is how you can do it. In the same way that we don't pay capital gains tax on the sale of a primary residence. So your own home that you're living in and that you own, when you sell it, you don't pay income tax on the money you make from that. Now, again, the federal government is sniffing around that really hard on a home equity tax, but for more than a generation now, it's been understood that you don't touch that. Well, apparently that's how a lot of doctors are feeling right now too. And so they got to really pay attention to this, because I'm not sure we can afford to lose any doctors who are probably thinking of heading to the States because of this.
Yeah, that's the thing. And when Dr. Ross had pointed out, I think a fair, valid point here that a lot of people don't realize or don't necessarily take into consideration, that they can't just raise their prices. Not that I support when companies are doing that as a customer. It's just I realize that's their option. You can, either lower your overhead or raise your revenues. That's what you do. Whereas doctors can't just do that. So they either have to really start cutting back. And the last thing you want is the doctor that, can't afford to pay the rent, or the doctor that, maybe we reuse these things, because it's like, you don't want to push them into a place where in their practices they're cutting corners, because that's the only option they have to lower costs.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and again, for people, I loved how you pointed out that the narrative is that if you just tax the daddy warbucks, if you find the monopoly man, that one guy, and you tax the bejesus out of him, that all of our social problems will go away. Like, it's such a ridiculous way of trying to explain this to people. I wanted to put a bit of a number on that. So it's between 4 and 5 days. So Franco Terrazzano and our team in Ottawa crunch these numbers. And apparently the amount that the government is planning on making from this capital gains tax increase is going to be gone in like 5 days. So at the rate of the Trudeau government spending, this big long thing that they're making as a standalone vote in the House of Commons, this is a hill to die on, it's going to solve all of our social problems, a chicken in every pot. No, it's going to be toast in like 5 days. So I have lunch meat for my kids upstairs in the fridge that's going to last longer, Andrew, than that money.
It's like the Liz Truss lettuce thing. We should do like a live cam and see where we're going there. I wanted to turn to another issue here. I mentioned the parliamentary budget officer being gagged. This is proving to be like a great pastime of the government. They're going full 50 Shades of Grey, not just on the parliamentary budget officer.
You were going to say that.
But they're also going after the oil and gas sector here. And it was amusing because a few weeks back, Charlie Angus introduces this private member's bill, basically making it so that if anyone says oil is good, you get, hauled off to one of his, communist gulags or whatnot. And now, like, that was like a punchline. Everyone's like, oh, Charlie Angus, what a nutcase. And now the Liberals are basically doing it with the oil and gas sector.
Yeah, so I don't have all the details, but I was reading up on it a bit this morning because your colleague, Rachel Emmanuel, very smartly flagged it on Twitter and said, guys, what's going on here? So apparently, this is generally what's happening. If you are an oil and gas company and you publish the fact that, say, you are capturing CO2, like at the other end of your production pipe, you're capturing it somehow, and this is having this kind of an impact on the environment. Apparently, the Trudeau government is looking to do some sort of embedded fact check sort of thing. So some panel somewhere will be able to decide whether or not to sue you as an environmental organization, meaning the energy company, and say that you have to prove all of that based on, this international panel of experts. Just imagine what their standards are. And so this is a little bit concerning, and it's something that the minister here in Alberta, Rebecca Schultz, was flagging, saying, we can't go down this road because this is censorship. This is a strange gag law. You're attacking our energy industry again. And so it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Apparently it's before the Senate right now. So we're going to be kicking some tires on this thing this week. But some to say, it looks like the Trudeau government is attacking Alberta's energy sector again, but this time in a weird sort of censorship, fact check, you can't prove that sort of way. And again, that's another way for an oil and gas company to be hindered, right? To have a pack of international groups on their back all the time, trying to reduce their ability to produce product. Very similar in the way that they were trying to ban pipelines, the way they were trying to ban tankers. It just seems like they're trying to put through just transition and put people out of jobs. So it just seems like a never-ending attack, largely against Alberta's main sector, the energy sector. But this time it's kind of strange. It's almost a censorship version of it. So definitely something we have to look into.
Yeah, and it's buried in the budget. And anytime they take something of this nature and slip it in the budget, we should always be mindful, because they're trying to hope that it's not big enough that it would rise to the point of bringing up outrage, but they just want to keep it under the radar, which is why no one really paid attention when the budget was first announced.
Yes, exactly. If I can, a couple of things for people. One, figure out how to read a budget. I know it can get cumbersome. I think the last federal budget was, I think it was 600 pages or something crazy, like just inexcusably long. It's padded with way too much social stuff and not the actual, these are the numbers, these are the facts. Let your feelings to be determined after the fact. There's a lot of feelings packed in there, but I would just definitely recommend that people get used to looking towards the back in the annex and looking at historical data tables on where spending has gone, where taxes have gone, and then really try to scour it and try to find any new taxes that are buried in there. Provincial budgets are usually a better place to start because they're usually much more straightforward and a lot shorter. There isn't a lot of filler shoved in there. And so I would start there. That's how we found the Netflix tax in British Columbia. That's how we found out, for example, they were removing the PST exemption on soda pop there. It's those details that'll eventually nickel and dime you to death, and they represent new taxes. But again, this seems like something that isn't even a tax issue. And so to have them put it in the budget is just really head scratching. So we're definitely going to be taking a look at that.
Yeah, you mentioned the Netflix tax, by the way. You and I have been around long enough into politics to remember when Stephen Harper was just relentlessly mocked by the media for saying the Liberals were going to tax your Netflix show. And now, admittedly, Stephen Harper, we should play the clip. It was really, I watched it not that long ago. It was one of those like Stephen Harper trying to be relatable clips where it's like he's listing TV shows he likes and it's not believable that he's ever seen any of the shows. He's like, I particularly like Breaking Bad. Like it was like, I particularly like insert popular show here, but he was right. I mean, the core point was, well, Breaking Bad is a good show. He was right about that, but he was right that the Liberals were going to tax Netflix. Now it took them a decade, but he wasn't lying.
No, he still did it. It's the same as when he was saying they're going to have little itty bitty deficits. Meanwhile, there's a $40 billion deficit, and the finance minister is scolding reporters about passing down debt to the last generation, and her government has doubled the debt. Like, it's kind of crazy pills. You start wondering if you're in the same sort of timeline of reality as everybody else. But yeah, I remember when he said that. It was during the 2015 election campaign. And yeah, it was similar. So the funniest thing, I can't repeat the funniest thing I saw him say once on the CBC because it's, that way. But the other funniest thing I saw him say once is when they asked him if he smoked marijuana?
Yeah.
And he said,
yeah, wasn't his answer, well, I have asthma, I've never smoked anything or something?
No, it was better. He's like, do I look like I smoke marijuana?
Oh.
He just did this deadpan at the camera. I think he had like a sweater vest on and stuff while he was doing it. But no,
I remember when that was like the question that could sink your political career. Like that shows that now it's like we have a leader who's like, I smoked it while I was in office, and he still gets elected.
Not today. Why?
Yeah,
of course. It's quite bizarre. And so this is where I want to bring it back to affordability and taxes for a second. And I just really wanted to stress to people, I heard the capital gains tax brought up on my local FM rock station. Like a couple DJs in the morning talking about it. And so I wanted to urge people, this has trickled down to the normal people. Like the people who don't follow politics shows like this, the people who don't follow the play-by-play in the House of Commons, average working people now are talking about this. And so a little bit of homework, if I can, take this and tell it to your sister and your brother-in-law and all of the normies in your family who don't live and breathe politics, and tell them how it's going to affect them, and namely how quickly Trudeau's going to burn through this money because of his spending habits. I think there's a chance that we can get the majority of politicians to eventually be opposed to something like this if we get enough people at the door angry about this.
Okay, we've got something for you, Kris. Sean has earned his keep today. Sean, take it away.
Something you might not know about me is that I love movies and TV shows. One of my all-time favorites is Breaking Bad. It's even available on some online streaming services if you've never seen it. But I'm running for Prime Minister. So why am I talking to you about TV shows? Because some politicians want to tax digital streaming services like Netflix and YouTube. Some have even called on us to introduce a Netflix tax. Now, Justin Trudeau and Thomas Mulcair have left the door wide open to doing just that. I'm 100% against a Netflix tax. Always have been, always will be. So the choice is clear. Only our Conservative Party can be trusted to focus on the needs of Canadian consumers and to keep your taxes low. Only our party can be trusted not to bring forward a new Netflix tax.
I like movies and TV shows. I'm making fun of him. I loved how honest and authentic he was about that. He never tried to be cool. And when he did like let loose, he was always very fun, like when he was singing and stuff like that. But yeah, in any case, yeah, he was right. Stephen Harper called it right there.
And I must stress, the Liberal Party at the time, the tweet's still up, said we will never bring in a Netflix tax. Have a good day. Like Sunny Way. Remember how that used to be their communication? That was so much nicer.
Yeah. And now they're doing one better, not just the tax, but also, and we're going to manipulate what you see on the homepage of it.
And you will like it.
Yeah.
No. So good job pulling that up. That was a blast from the past for sure.
All right. Well, thanks, Sean, there. Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. We will see you next week. Thanks for coming on as always.
You bet.
All right. Now, I was not going to bring this up because I went through like painstaking efforts to hide it from you, but it's amusing now, and I may have to like crowdfund a new computer. So 10 minutes into the show, I spilled half of my coffee on my laptop. So I was like furiously like trying to avoid you seeing me wipe it up with a shirt, which I've probably now ruined because it was the only thing I had available. So anytime there was a guest on the screen, assume that I was like doing this, and Sean was like very graciously not throwing the camera back to me. But I don't know, my computer is not in flames, so we'll see. It might just smell like Americano. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show here on True North. Thank you, God bless, and good day to you all.
Thanks for listening to the Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.